There is a specific kind of silence that falls over a baseball stadium when something is happening that nobody has a word for yet. Not the silence of a close game. Not the held breath of a full count with 2 outs. This is a different silence entirely, slower, heavier, the kind that settles into a crowd when the people watching begin to collectively realize that what they are witnessing does not fit inside any framework they have ever used to understand baseball. That silence fell over the stadium in the 6th inning. Nobody announced it. Nobody pointed to it. It simply arrived, the way certain moments in sport always arrive, without warning and without permission. And when it broke, when the final out of the 6th inning was recorded and Shohei Ohtani turned and walked toward the dugout, the applause that followed was not the ordinary applause of a crowd appreciating a good performance. It was something closer to bewilderment expressing itself through sound. 6 innings. 0 runs. A pitching line so clean, so complete, so statistically precise that the analysts scrambling to contextualize it in real time kept running into the same problem. The comparisons they reached for kept falling short. Every name they tried to invoke, every career they tried to hold up alongside what Ohtani is building right now in 2025, came back insufficient. Not because those players were not great. They were. Some of them were the greatest pitchers who ever lived. But they were only pitchers. And that is the wall that every conversation about Ohtani eventually hits, the wall where the normal vocabulary of baseball simply stops working. Because what he is doing on the mound right now is not happening in isolation. It is happening alongside what he is doing at the plate. It is happening alongside a batting line that would make him one of the most dangerous hitters in the National League even if he never threw another pitch in his life. The legends watching this are not simply impressed. They are bewildered. And the difference between those 2 words is the entire story. To understand why the baseball world reacted the way it did, you cannot simply look at the final pitching line. You have to go inside the game, inning by inning, and trace exactly how this performance was constructed. Because dominant outings in baseball can happen 2 ways. They can happen because a pitcher's pure stuff is so overwhelming on a given night that opposing hitters simply have no answer for the velocity, no answer for the movement, no answer for anything being thrown at them. Those nights exist. They are spectacular. And they are also, to some degree, explainable. The stuff was electric. The command was sharp. Everything clicked. Then there is the other kind of dominant outing. The kind that does not rely on any single element being at its absolute peak. The kind that is built pitch by pitch, decision by decision, adjustment by adjustment, a performance that reveals not just physical excellence but a quality of thinking that operates on a different frequency from what most pitchers are capable of. What Ohtani produced in those 6 innings was the second kind. Emphatically. The first inning was controlled aggression. He established his fastball early, not to overpower, but to plant information. He wanted opposing hitters to carry a specific picture of his fastball location into their mental database. High in the zone. Consistent. Threatening enough to demand respect. The second inning introduced the adjustment. Having established the fastball high, he began working the splitter low, the exact opposite quadrant of the strike zone. The contrast was violent in its effectiveness. Hitters who had calibrated their eyes and their timing for one part of the zone were suddenly being asked to recalibrate for the other. Contact became difficult. Solid contact became nearly impossible. By the third inning, something remarkable was happening. Opposing hitters were not simply struggling. They were visibly confused. The body language in the opposing dugout, the frustration, the quiet conversations between players who had faced Ohtani before and players who had not, told a story that the box score could only partially capture. The fourth inning was where the performance crossed into something else entirely. Ohtani faced the heart of the opposing order, the 3 and 4 hitters, the professional damage dealers, the men whose careers are built on making exactly this kind of moment difficult for exactly this kind of pitcher. He retired them without drama. Not with overpowering strikeouts that sent the crowd into a frenzy. With precision. with pitches that arrived in locations that made hard contact structurally impossible regardless of the swing. The fifth inning added the layer of endurance. This is where starting pitchers, even excellent ones, begin to show the small cracks that accumulate over the course of a game. The fastball loses a tick. The command tightens slightly under the accumulated physical demand. The pitcher begins to rely more heavily on a single-out pitch rather than the full arsenal. Ohtani did not crack. His velocity in the fifth inning was indistinguishable from his velocity in the first. His command was tighter, not looser. And the sequencing, the chess match he had been playing since the opening pitch, had by this point grown so layered, so complex, that opposing hitters were no longer simply trying to hit a baseball. They were trying to solve a puzzle that kept changing its own rules. The sixth inning was the final statement. The scoreboard said 0. But the performance said something larger, something that the legends watching from press boxes and television studios and living rooms across the baseball world immediately recognized as significant. Here is what matters about the reaction from baseball's most accomplished voices. These are not casual fans expressing enthusiasm. These are not commentators reaching for superlatives because superlatives generate engagement. The men and women who have spent their careers at the absolute top of this sport, who have won Cy Young awards themselves, who have thrown no-hitters, who have stood on the mound in the seventh game of a World Series, do not use the word bewildered lightly. Bewilderment, in the vocabulary of someone who has seen everything baseball can produce, is a very specific response. It is what happens when the brain's pattern recognition system, a system trained over decades of experience at the highest level, suddenly cannot find the pattern. That is what Ohtani is producing in 2025. The conversations happening among baseball's legendary voices share a common thread. They begin with the standard acknowledgments, the velocity, the arsenal, the command, the results. They move quickly through those because those elements, while genuinely extraordinary, are at least comprehensible within the existing framework of how baseball people think about great pitching. And then they arrive at the thing they cannot explain. The thing they cannot explain is the simultaneity. The fact that the discipline required to build the pitching line Ohtani is building, the preparation, the study, the physical demand, the mental intensity of executing a complex game plan across 6 full innings against professional hitters, exists in the same body, in the same season, in the same week, as the discipline required to lead a major league lineup in offensive production. These are not simply two difficult things happening at once. They are two things that have historically been understood as mutually exclusive at the elite level. The physical demands pull in different directions. The mental bandwidth required for each pulls in different directions. The preparation pulls in different directions. And yet, the record says otherwise. The scoreboard says otherwise. 6 scoreless innings says otherwise. The legends are bewildered because they built their entire understanding of what is possible in baseball on assumptions that Ohtani is quietly, consistently, and completely dismantling. Let us talk about the pitching record directly. Because the numbers themselves deserve a moment of undistracted attention. What Ohtani is building in 2025 on the mound is not simply a strong season by the standards of a two-way player. It is a strong season by the standards of any pitcher in baseball. Full stop, no qualifier, no asterisk attached to acknowledge the remarkable circumstances surrounding it. The ERA sits at a number that places him among the elite starters in the National League. The innings pitched are accumulating at a pace that projects toward a full, complete, workhorse season, the kind of season that used to be the baseline expectation for an ace and has become increasingly rare as pitcher usage patterns across the sport have evolved toward specialization and protection. The strikeout numbers are significant. But more significant, in the view of the people who study pitching most seriously, is the batting average against. Because batting average against is the number that cuts through everything, through park factors, through defensive support, through the noise of sequencing and timing and small sample variation, and asks a single, clean question: when opposing hitters face this pitcher, how often do they make meaningful contact? Ohtani's answer to that question in 2025 has been ruthless. The legends watching these numbers accumulate are doing the same calculation that every serious baseball mind eventually does, projecting forward, asking what a full season at this pace looks like, and then sitting quietly with the answer for a moment before deciding whether to say it out loud. Because the answer is historic. Not historic in a polite, contextual, careful way. Historic in the way that forces the record books to create a new category. What does not appear in the box score, what never appears in any box score, is the architecture of preparation that makes a performance like this possible. The 6 scoreless innings did not begin when Ohtani took the mound. They began days earlier, in the film sessions where every opposing hitter's tendencies were studied not as statistics but as behavioral patterns. Where the question being asked was not simply what pitch does this batter struggle with but why does he struggle with it, and how does that reason change across different counts, different game situations, different moments of pressure. They began in the bullpen sessions where sequences were rehearsed, not individual pitches, but the specific order of pitches, the deliberate construction of a false pattern designed to be exploited once the real pitch arrived. They began in the physical preparation, the recovery protocols, the nutrition discipline, the sleep structures, that make it possible for a body doing what Ohtani's body does on both sides of the baseball equation to arrive on the mound with full physical capacity rather than accumulated compromise. This is what the legends recognize when they watch him pitch. They see not just the results of physical talent. They see the results of a system. A complete, integrated, relentlessly maintained system of preparation that treats nothing as routine and nothing as guaranteed. Every scoreless inning is not an accident. It is the product of decisions made hours, days, and weeks before the first pitch. There is something worth examining carefully in the specific word the legends keep reaching for. Bewildered. Not amazed. Not impressed. Not even in awe, which would be the natural vocabulary for describing an extraordinary athletic performance. Bewildered. Bewilderment implies a disruption of understanding. It implies that the person experiencing it arrived with a framework, a confident, experienced, carefully constructed framework for understanding what they were looking at, and found that framework inadequate. That is a profound thing to happen to people who have spent their entire professional lives developing exactly that framework. What Ohtani is doing to the legends of baseball in 2025 is the same thing he is doing to opposing hitters. He is arriving in a place where their preparation is complete, their experience is genuine, their understanding is deep, and then producing something that sits outside the edges of all of it. The 6 scoreless innings are not just a pitching line. They are a question that baseball has not yet developed the language to fully answer. Here is where the story does not end, because it cannot end yet. The 6 scoreless innings are finished. The performance has been logged. The legends have said what they said, and those words are now part of the permanent record of how 2025 unfolded in Major League Baseball. But the season continues. The starts continue. The record continues to be written, one inning at a time, one pitch at a time, one decision at a time, by a player who has never once given the impression that he believes he has reached the ceiling of what he is capable of. The bewilderment of the legends is real. But it is also, in a certain light, the most honest possible response to something that has no precedent and no reliable projection. Nobody knows where this ends. Nobody knows what the final pitching line looks like in October. Nobody knows how high the record climbs before the season is over. What everybody knows, what the legends watching this are forced to acknowledge every single time they try to contextualize what they are seeing, is that the record being built right now is unlike anything baseball has produced before. 6 scoreless innings. And the season is not finished.